Hello, welcome to Books and Brews,
the place where beer and literature meet.
with your host, the seer of the beer, Chris Powell.
And Laura Vosica, author of the Bluebells Chronicles.
Each month, we invite a guest author to read their words and talk about writing while sipping beer specially paired with their work. This month's guest is Laura Creedle.
So sit back
Pop a cold one
and dive into some books
and brews.
Welcome to Books and Brews number 84. We are here today with Laura Creedle. So welcome, Laura. How has your month been?
It's been fabulous. I live in Texas and we've been in the midst of a drought. And so we had just the most amazing amount of rain and everything is green and lush.
Oh, I bet that feels good. We're living
Yeah.
in Tennessee as opposed to our former northern Minnesota, where about this time 3 years ago, I sank into snow up to mid-thigh. And there was nothing around. We had a little creek. I was coming off the bridge, thought that the snow had melted, and I sank in. And I was standing there with no idea how I was going to get out.
You know, it's funny. I actually grew up in Minnesota, so I know that feeling. I grew up in Rochester. We spent a lot of time north of Brainerd, though. So
Okay, yeah. So you know that cold that's up there.
I know what it is to sink up into wet slushy snow.
Yeah, we're in spring here, and garden planting, you couldn't do that in Duluth until May, maybe June 20th.
Oh, yeah.
maybe July 5th. It just depends on the
I
year.
hunted for Easter eggs in the snow, so,
Yes, I remember that. The years you don't dye the eggs because the white snow hides the white eggs. Yeah, fun times. So today's guest for our listeners is Laura Creedle. She is the author of The Deep Well, which Kirkus Reviews calls a fresh take on horror, and The Love Letters of Abelard and Lily. When not writing, Laura can usually be found playing pinball or watching indie horror. Laura lives in Austin, Texas with her husband and a feral cat named Hellman, who is found with her head stuck in a mayonnaise jar. How did you happen to get her head out of the mayonnaise jar?
I didn't do that. And what's interesting, my daughter is a doctor. She was finishing up with school, and she was going to Ohio for her residency. And this cat showed up with a mayonnaise jar, and they tried to trap it for 3 days. The poor thing had her head. And then they finally got it out. She fed her, of course, and she was starving. And then she showed up the next day and was hungry, fully grown cat, so very feral. And my daughter said, Mom, I've got to move in 2 days. I don't know what to do with this cat. And I said, okay, we'll live trap it and we'll release her in our room. So she lived under our bed for 6 months, just barely came out to, and slowly she has made her way out into the world. Still not a petting cat, but she's very social. So,
as long as you don't pet her.
As long as you don't try to touch her or move suddenly.
And animals are interesting. We're surrounded by animals here. And so we have about 30 sheep now. And there are a couple, they're divided between two pastures, and there's sort of an alpha female in each pasture who will come up to me. There are actually about 3 now in the upper pasture who will come to me. They like to be petted. They like to eat snacks out of my hands. And the other ones, they'll come around to eat the food, but if I try and pet them, they'll just flee. Like, the monster's trying to touch us. Stranger danger. So
stranger danger, that's the way.
Right. So they're fun to watch. But anyway, our first drink, it's called a Mexican coffee cocktail. This mug has 1 ounce of Kahlua and half an ounce of tequila. And now I'm going to totally guess at what is 6 ounces of fresh brewed coffee.
Oh, that
I'm
sounds
guessing,
good.
I'm looking forward to this. And honestly, anything with Kahlua, I'm going to love. Okay, we're not done yet. We're going to shake up the other whipped cream. And we're going to put whipped cream in here. And you're probably going to see me with whipped cream mustache because I might have overdone it. And next, we're going to add a sprinkle of cinnamon. That was too much. And we're going to garnish it with the cinnamon stick.
Oh,
So
that looks
this is,
lovely.
yeah, this is the Mexican coffee. That is very nice for a winter night.
I
It's
bet.
nice any night.
I wish I wish I had one of those. That looks delicious.
Go ahead with reading number 1.
All right. April didn't remember much from her time behind the wall, but she did remember the deep hole. The deep hole dwarfed everything else. Even the fortress-like stone wall surrounding the compound, which seemed to stretch into the clouds, was nothing compared to the deep hole. The deep hole was the Ojo de Cristo copper mine, a sprawling canyon carved into the surrounding mountains. The sides of the mine were stepped down so that at one time trucks could wind a spiral path to the bottom of the hole and back out again, laden with ore. They were mining for secrets at the center of the earth, drilling a borehole down deeper through the earth's crust than anyone had before. Her dad was the drilling foreman at the Ojo de Cristo borehole. While he worked, April and her mom spent most of their time in the den, watching DVDs, eating crackers, drinking ginger ale, her mom occasionally raising her head to dry heave into a small metal pan she kept by the couch. April didn't know it then, but her mom was pregnant with her sister, Jules. Her favorite movie was Kiki's Delivery Service. April had watched it for so many times she began to think of it not as a movie, but as an instruction manual. Her little pink bicycle with the training wheels was not a bike, but a broom. Like her dad, she had important work to do, deliveries to make. Her mom smiled when April told her that she was going to make a delivery. "You can bring Dad his coffee," Mom would say, handing April an imaginary thermos. They lived in the biggest of the workers' bungalows near Robert Steenkamp's sprawling hacienda. Mr. Steenkamp, her dad's boss, was a pale, thin-lipped old man. Everyone called him King. His crown, a crisp straw cowboy hat to keep the harsh New Mexico sun off his face. April wasn't allowed anywhere near the open pit mine. Of course not. The voice was a giggle at first, like a whisper on the wind. It sounded so much like Kiki that April imagined Kiki was calling to her, begging her to be part of the delivery service. All she had to do was fly. That day, April left Mom asleep on the couch and went out to the backyard to ride her bike around the patio. She heard the voice call her name, clear as day. April. She left the patio and went through the back gate, searching for the source of the voice. April. It was stronger than coming from the direction of the open pit mine. Kiki calling her to fly. April wasn't supposed to go near the open pit mine, but Mom was asleep and she wouldn't know. There was a wide, dusty asphalt path from the Steenkamp's big house that led to the drill site and around towards the open pit. It joined up with the driveway that ran through the front gate and out onto the road. April rode her bike onto the path towards the open pit mine and the voice. As she rode down the path, Dr. Travers Steenkamp, King Steenkamp's wife, drove by on the golf cart she used to shuttle back and forth between the home and the lab. Dr. Travers Steenkamp wore kitten heels, a white lab coat over a sleek red dress, her blonde hair in a tight bun on the back of her head. April worried that King's wife would stop her from completing her mission, but Dr. Travers Steenkamp barely shot April a glance as she guided the golf cart in a wide semicircle around the bicycle. Her golf cart, her slingback shoes, the red lips a shade darker than the dress were etched into April's mind. She was beautiful and cool, such a contrast to her mom heaving into a metal pan on the couch, her hair unwashed. Dr. Travers Steenkamp died weeks later in the accident, along with the rest of them, along with her dad. The closer April got to the open pit mine, the louder the voice became. The voice said one thing over and over: time to fly.
I found interesting Kirkus's comment that this is a fresh take on horror. What would be a sort of a common take on horror? What defines horror? As I've read it, I found it's a broader field than I used to realize.
I think horror is having kind of a renaissance right now. So there's a lot of really interesting horror, and a lot of it is kind of new and fresh, which is delightful to be part of that. I think people look for the haunted house
Mhm.
as the, the sort of the novel. And I also think a lot of people have written like slashers that are basically homages to the old slasher movies of the 80s and 90s, that they probably grew up with. And while I kind of enjoy that, I feel like it's not as interesting to me. I think
Mhm.
I'm more interested in the horror of the mind and how we deal with each other socially, the interface between strange events and how people interact after that.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And it seems to me now, it's funny you talk about ADHD, and I always say, I know my kids got the ADHD from me. I cannot sit still for an hour interview. So pardon my wiggling around like I'm in kindergarten
uh,
still. I need one of those big bouncy balls to sit on, It
I do
makes
too.
because you have to concentrate just not to fall over. Um, so when I started reading horror, it was sort of after the indie publishing got big. Has that sort of changed it? Because I've experienced more paranormal, more monsters, more demons.
Yeah, there's so many great indie publishers out there, and a lot of them, they're as good as anything that's going on at the majors. There's a bookstore in San Antonio called Ghoulish, and it's just the tiniest little bookstore, but it's great. And he publishes, he's a independent publisher, and his horror books are amazing. Everything that I've read by him that has come out of Ghoulish books has been great. So it is interesting because I think things go in waves, and
Oh,
there was
definitely.
a vampire wave, obviously, and
Yes.
that went back, and now vampires are back, and so I think horror is going through a nice wave.
Right.
Yeah.
Is it in part that indie publishers, are they a little less in it for the money as opposed to the big, I think it's the big five, that they want to publish only what they're positive will sell?
Yeah, I mean, I've known several indie publishers. I think you have to absolutely love what you're doing,
Mhm.
because it is a hard road to, promote and publish books, and it's not it's not necessarily a money-making venture.
Right. Well, I was just talking on my other program I do called Step Into a Story with somebody who does publishing. Well, she doesn't do publishing. She does more marketing and pre-publishing services for authors. And she was talking about how the author has so little control over their work with the big five because they need to know that it's going to sell, whereas the indie author and the indie publisher can do whatever they want. And I think that's really expanded our horizons quite a bit.
I mean, I feel lucky because I was on a big five, and the woman who actually acquired my book, she had a family situation, so I didn't hear from her for a year, which was crazy. And when I finally got to my agent, he wouldn't track, everything down, and I got a choice of, do I wait for her to be ready to work on my book, or do I go with someone else? And I went with an editor named Courtney Stevenson. She was fantastic. She does not like horror, which is crazy when you
Really?
think about it. She's more of a romance writer, and so we had a great time working together. And she, edited both of my books, and I've got one coming out in the fall. So it was kind of a trial by fire for both of us, because there are a lot of moving parts in this book.
Yes, there are. And I was thinking about that, as you were talking earlier about the ADHD, and you do make a comment, I think, at the end of the book that you had threads just all over the place that your editor had to kind of say,
Oh yeah. Honestly, there was a character, and he was everyone's favorite character, that was in this book and was in the next book. And it was one thread too many, just trying to keep this like line through both books. And yeah. And I had a second cult, and like sort of culting wars between a religious and a, the cult that exists. And she was just like, I can't even keep this straight. And I've read this so many times. So I'm like, it's gotta go. And I'm like, okay, yeah. So
yeah,
that's what a good editor will do.
Right. How
Yeah.
hard was it for you to kill your babies?
This is interesting. And I don't know if my daughter, what she will think about this, but in the book, the character of Grace is kind of based on my daughter, and she read it and she was like, oh, this is me. So So Grace and I didn't think that this character that I killed was really close to Grace. And when my daughter got the edited version back, she read it and she was like, "Where's my boyfriend? You killed him." I'm like, "Sorry, baby."
Luckily, most daughters can't say that about their mothers. Why did you kill my boyfriend
My
for?
boyfriend, you killed him. So somewhere down the line, I promised to write a novel with a Grace-like character and that character who
and the boyfriend. We need to move on to cocktail number 2.
Oh, lovely.
And this one is called B52. It is a layered shot. So I picked this based on the idea of these layers and layers and layers of the well. I believe they call it the well.
Lovely. That's very inventive.
We're going to see how this works. So luckily, as I said, I've never made a cocktail before. Let me rinse this out. And I think that the technique to this, although the directions didn't say so, is to pour the liquors slowly over a spoon. So we're going to start with Kahlua because in my never to be humbled opinion, you can't go wrong with Kahlua. I'm going to pour a 1/2 ounce of Kahlua, and because I only have 2 hands, I will be completely unable to hold this up and show you what I'm doing. But the Irish cream liqueur is next. It's also a 1/2 ounce, and I'm going to pour it very slowly over a spoon to see if it will stay layered. And this pretty much determines my future as a bartender. Okay. Just in case
didn't start out easy.
Farming and writing thing doesn't work out. Well, it looks to me like they're mixing. So
if you let it sit, it might settle out a little bit.
Yeah, it might a little bit. I don't know if I poured too fast. You can kind of see that layer on the bottom. Third layer is going to be a 1/2 ounce of triple sec. And once again, I'm going to pour it over the back of the spoon and see what happens. This worked really wonderfully when my husband did it with one of his layered drinks. So
nice.
Yeah, I'm spilling it all over the place. It doesn't want to go nicely down the spoon. So here is the B52. In theory, this is a layered drink with it should be the dark, the light, and the kind of clear alcohol. And I'll taste it. That is really good. My second choice that I considered was, guess what? A White Russian. Surprise.
Oh, nice.
That would have fit the reading well too. Go ahead with reading number 2.
All right, this is the Wikipedia page for the original incident. The Ojo de Cristo mining disaster. Robert King Steenkamp IV, CEO of Camper Oil and Mining LLC, initially became interested in the Ojo de Cristo open pit copper mine after his wife, Dr. Ella Travers Steenkamp, read about the history of the massacres at the mine site. Main article, 1936 Ojo de Cristo mine fight. After visiting the site, King Steenkamp decided to drill a deep borehole to reach farther beneath the surface than anyone had before. Using improved drilling techniques, engineers claim to have reached the depth of nearly 9 miles, 14,484 meters, slightly deeper than the earlier Russian Kola Superdeep Borehole, 12,262 meters. However, the job site was plagued with technical setbacks and possible sabotage, which destroyed the drill before the depth could be independently verified. An explosion at the site destroyed the mud lubrication system, causing the deep borehole drill to seize and snap. After the destruction of the drill, a gunfight broke out at the mining compound. 19 people were killed in total during the event. The motivation behind the gunfight is unknown. According to the relatives of the victim, the daughter of the drill site foreman, William J. Fisher, 5-year-old April Fisher, purportedly began to hear a voice from the borehole. After the massacre, Robert Steenkamp disappeared. A photo supposedly taken of him at Camphor Mine in Peru years later turned out to be a hoax. No trace of Robert Steenkamp has ever been found, leading to speculation that he escaped through a portal opened at the site. See The Deep Well Cult, a 2016 horror movie entitled Hellhold, known as The Bicycle Girl in European release, based on the story, holds little resemblance to the actual occurrences at the Ojo de Cristo mine.
Very nice. How much of your story was inspired by the Kola Superdeep hole?
You know, a lot of it. I've always been fascinated by that. I kind of my husband is kind of an engineering wonk. So we
Mhm.
love engineering stories and engineering disasters um and the Kola Superdeep Borehole drill site was kind of fascinating to me, you know, and the legend, and this was a very much an urban legend of the 90s, early 2000s, was that they drilled down so far that they drilled to hell, and then they heard the voices from hell, and then everything went haywire and the drill site was abandoned as people fled. But what really happened is they got to where the earth turned plastic much faster than they assumed they would be, because it heated up that much quicker. Like what we assumed was the core of the earth, the molten core kind of extends out farther than they originally thought. And
Right.
but what happened to the borehole is that they stopped, because this was a Soviet era drill site. They stopped when they reached the world record. They stopped the drill so everybody could come celebrate.
Mhm.
And as physics would tell you, when they started it back up 2 weeks later, it snapped.
The
Nothing
drill
to do.
itself just snapped.
The drill itself, because you know, think about the angular momentum of a drill that's like miles and miles long.
Right.
Once you start it, you know, you probably should never stop it, because restarting it would be just
Right.
so much torque.
I did some reading on the Kola Superdeep hole, and it was interesting how much hotter it became. And put this in perspective, how thick is the Earth's crust versus how far down did they actually get?
Yeah, the
Still
oh,
can't
it
see
is
layers.
separating.
Oh, can you see it a little bit?
I
Yeah.
can see that it's separating out. Yeah, see, it just
Yeah,
requires
just
a
a
little
little.
patience.
Yeah, I'll have to just let that sit a bit.
Yeah, the crust is so thin, and the mantle of the earth is actually very large, and then the molten or iron core is small, but it got hotter much faster than they imagined. So I mean, it's a very interesting advance in science.
But didn't they go, what, about 2.5 miles down?
I think I actually, when I read this, I think these are, you know, I made up some of the thing, but 1,200 meters basically, which is, you know, that's about 8 miles maybe. They went
But
very
the
far.
crust itself is like, what, 25 miles?
So the crust is relatively thin. The mantle is very, very thick. So
Okay.
they were surprised that it got hot as fast as it did.
Now, the outer layer is the crust, right?
The crust, the outer layer of the
And
crust.
then you go to the mantle. Okay,
Yeah.
I was surprised when I read it that this deep hole was deeper than the Mariana Trench and greater than the height of Mount Everest.
Yeah.
And yet it was still, if it was 8 miles deep, you know, then the crust is, you know, like that much more,
Yeah. It's
you know,
crazy.
at least twice as much farther beyond. And it just really tells you how, in a way, big this world is compared to what we think we can do and what we think we know. How do you know there was no truth to people hearing stories, or do they have any, I mean, voices, and do they know where these stories came from?
That much heat, you know, um, I do think it would make eerie noises from what I've heard. But you know, that you imagine a drilling down to a spot where the earth becomes plastic, it's going to make some strange noises.
Right.
So, you know, I think that and the fact that the site was quickly abandoned because the drill broke, just kind of led people to kind of take off on their own with that, you know.
And
Yeah.
inspire stories. In one part, April finds these articles where they're talking about how every 12 years, almost exactly on October 10th, these crazy, violent, almost psychotic mass hysteria episodes break out at some mine or other. Is that based on any truth?
No, that is completely from my brain. That has nothing to do with Kola Superdeep Borehole. And you know, it's up to you, and you know, without spoiling, if you decide what actually happened, how much of it is paranormal, how much of it is, and I leave that intentionally vague because I want people to think about it and come to their own conclusion, and you know, to leave it kind of open-ended in that.
Well, I thought it was interesting because, to me, given the wide range of things I read, it sounded like, well, strange things like that do happen. And when I saw that there was a lot of basis of the Kola Superdeep hole in Russia, I thought, well, maybe that happened too. So you convinced me.
I'm glad you were like, oh, this would happen. I do think things
Right.
become a self-fulfilling prophecy. I mean, if you believe something's going to happen, and it becomes part of the ethos of a community to believe. I mean,
Right.
like the early werewolf, there's a historical antecedents to
Mhm.
werewolf legends, but then they took off on their own, and by the light of the moon, and that's all
Right.
invented. But it doesn't take much to.
That's a fascinating subject because when I was researching for my own books, one of the things I stumbled on was the Vampire of Melrose Abbey in Scotland. And
Interesting.
what's especially fascinating about it is where it's recorded. Now it's been long enough since I did my research. There was, I believe it's called the Scala Chroniton, something like that. The New Something or Other journal. These were historical records kept, I think, primarily by monks from the 12th century onwards, so probably the 1100s onward. And it is in this historical journal that, according to everything the people who wrote it said, this is a historical record. This isn't fiction. It's not made up. And that's where the story of the Melrose Abbey vampire is recorded, about what they call the Hundprest, which is the dog priest, because he wasn't living a very priestly life. He was living a very terrible life. They record in what is a historical, and we know that the other things in this are historical. Other sources verify the other historical events noted in this source. And they tell about these 4 monks going out and watching the grave because people were complaining that even after he died, this priest kept coming to bug them. And they watched this and they reported that he came up out of the grave. And the more I researched, I found out there are vampire stories in virtually every culture throughout history. And that, to me, it's easy to say, oh, vampires, especially, we're modern. We only believe in science and logic. But logic forces you to ask, why does every single culture, or most of them across centuries, going back to, BC, where are they all coming from?
It's fascinating. Everyone has a vampire mythology, and they are remarkably similar.
Yes, they are, and I believe the same is true for werewolves.
That is fascinating. I love that kind of thing. I love Scottish mythology too. My next novel, and you write about Scottish features, and I'm going to say this wrong, but a Glaistig, which is Scottish, Glaistig. It is a woman who kind of enchants men, and it sits by a stream and asks to be taken over across the stream, and halfway, once you get across, she eats you basically. So she's got cloven hooves, and that would ruin your day. So that's in my next novel. So I'm like, I love that. I love the Scottish lore.
It's my dream to have time to sit down and collect a whole bunch of those and put that together, because I know my readers would like that.
I bet they would.
So what is your first book about?
Oh, the love letters of Abelard and Lily. Yeah, that was a very personal book. It's not horror. It's about a girl who is ADHD and dyslexic, as I am, and she falls in love with a boy who is autistic, and they have troubles communicating because she talks a lot. And I was just talking about her communicative errors, but difficulties. But so they communicate through texting each other sections of the letters of Abelard and Heloise.
Okay, which is a book from when?
It's a late 17th century book, and it's Abelard was a famous medieval scholar, and he was just kind of a brilliant Christian scholar. She was an abbess, and they had and he actually was her tutor originally. So
Interesting.
and they had basically a very forbidden love, and their letters are just amazing. They're just passionate and very adolescent in some ways to me. I mean, like they are just, if I can't see you now, I'll die, kind of, and yeah, and so they text these quotes back and forth, and it was a delight reading these and pulling out quotes that were specific to their situation, and because I'm here at Austin and I live next to the University of Texas. The way I make sense of this is like Abelard's father is a professor of medieval history, and Lily's father was one of his students before he left, because he's very ADHD and never finishes anything he starts. So that's how they both know the love letters of Abelard and Lily, because not many teenagers would know that.
I think not many people today would know it, period. I think I'm reasonably well read, although my husband is way better read than I am even, and I'd never heard of it. So, but 17th century, that's going back a ways.
It's, you write romance. I am not that much of a romance writer, and I found it really inspiring. It's a tiny little book. It's just Abelard and Heloise. I heartily recommend it. It will give you, there are moments that are just like, just so tender. So.
Which I think really tells you how much human nature never changes. We have these ideas about people in the past.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of them are so wrong.
Yeah. And it really, and to tell you the truth, because I'm not a romance writer, and when I started this book, it was really about Lily and her struggles with school and her struggles with her ADHD and her dyslexia, and I had this tiny little character of Abelard in the corner, and everybody kept saying, more of that, more romance. And I did not know how to write romance. I really don't. There's beats, and it's interesting because there's a similar kind of reveal and tension in horror as there's romance. And now that I've written both, I see that. But I was flummoxed. How am I going to add more romance? So I started looking sources all throughout history, and I just read this, and it spoke to me. And that's why I put that in the novel.
That's amazing. And I think it'll introduce that novel to people today. And I think the more we can broaden our reading, read things from the past, the more we expand our own mind. We're ready to go on to drink 3.
Oh, nice.
So you can see the nice, when I opened the freezer, it didn't look frosted like this, but as soon as the air hit it. So we're going to start with 1.5 ounces of gin. I'm going with the indigo gin.
I love it.
I have plain old Seagram's right over there too. But Chris thought perhaps
I love it because the cover is purple and it's Empress gin color.
Oh yes, so. I wish I had thought of that. I would have sounded so intelligent saying that. And in fact, I have your cover right here. So I believe I'm putting in 1.5 ounces. And yes,
perfect match.
Very, very close. Okay, so now we're going to put in 1 teaspoon of green chartreuse. This drink, by the way, called the Verdant Lady. Okay, so there goes just over a teaspoon of green chartreuse. Okay, so now we want 1/2 ounce of fresh lime juice. We want 1/4 ounce of simple syrup. And this is what I have, Rosa simple syrup. And once again, back to the ADHD. I do not like measuring. It bores me. So
you're after my own heart. My husband makes drinks with teaspoons and droppers and all, and I'm like, there's some of this and some of that, and that's good. That's fine.
Yeah, I used to by color. What, it calls for paprika? Well, I have this other stuff that's red. That should work. Sometimes it did. Okay, so now we're going to put in fresh mint leaves. It calls for 4 of them. I'm just going to put in a bunch. And you know what? I was supposed to put this all into the shaker that is loaded up with ice. And I think this is another trait of ADHD. We don't like to take the time to read directions. Just like, let me just do it. Let me just start. And that is how you make mistakes. So I have
sometimes delightful mistakes.
Right. It wants me to shake it for 15 to 30 seconds.
You're doing good.
So I'm going to pour it in here. And yeah, so this obviously picked up the color of the indigo gin because in theory, this was supposed to be a bit of an acid green color. And I think Yep, I think that had I made it with the Seagram's gin, that it would have come out more green. And then people would see why it correlates to your reading. As it is, they're going to go, well, nope. As it is, we're going to say, oh, it's totally to match the cover.
You've totally curated it to my book. I appreciate you.
Right. Go ahead with reading number 3.
All right.
That's tart. I probably won't be making that again.
I think a little more simple syrup then. Yeah.
I will do that. I'll throw some more simple syrup in there and see what happens.
See what you think. Because usually if it's too tart, it's just the acid sugar balance.
Add simple syrup. I'm just going to pour it in there. Okay. Let's see what happens. That's a lot better. Thank you for your suggestion.
All right. This is Jules her younger sister's been hounding her to go take her to the football game, and April doesn't want to be out in public because she doesn't want to face the people who are, accusing her. If we can't go to the game, can we at least go to the Sonic? Jules asked brightly. Everyone is going to the Sonic. Jules' voice was a foghorn cutting through her thoughts. Sometimes she found Jules' in-your-face personality to be a lot, but this week she was grateful for it. Jules kept her from wallowing. Sure, she answered, mimicking the festive tone of voice. Why not? It didn't hurt to be nice to Jules, especially now. Jules rarely talked about the harsh middle school reality of life as a kid sister of the bicycle girl, mostly because Jules wanted to be known as anything other than the kid sister of the bicycle girl. Fair. But this week, the bicycle girl urban legend was going to be inescapable for both of them. If the man in the black truck followed them, at least they'd be in the Sonic, where there would be a crowd. Safe. They drove the short distance to the Sonic, and April stayed in the car while Jules made the middle school social scene by the cement picnic bench. It was cool but bright, and April rolled up the car windows to cut out the noise of Jules and her friends. She scrolled on her phone and drifted. A crisp double rap on the driver's side window started her. A woman with soft brown shoulder-length hair and a professional-grade smile stood by the driver's side window, holding a nice coffee drink. She looked vaguely familiar, but she should have been more than familiar. April thought she knew everyone who worked at the Sonic. Maybe she was new from the local college? April rolled down the window. I'm sorry, I didn't order that, she said. Oh, I know, the woman replied. Belatedly, April realized she wasn't wearing the uniform, and she was older than April first imagined, late 20s maybe. Iced vanilla caramel latte for you. She thrust the drink towards April. Do you remember me? Marianne. It was the caramel latte that shook the memory loose. When April was 14, Marianne had pretended to be on a college visit, had brought her a caramel latte at the downtown coffee shop, and was nice to her. April had been hungry for nice. In return for a caramel latte and a few sad crumbs of attention, April gave away way too much information about herself and how she felt about the whole massacre thing before her spider sense went off. When April tried to leave, Marianne had presented her with a rapturous vision of how once April resurrected King to this earthly dimension, all of his followers would be free from pain and suffering. They would all live forever in golden harmony. Marianne was a member of the Deep Well cult. How could I forget? April shifted in her seat and looked around for the black truck. It was nowhere in sight. What do you want, Marianne? I thought we could talk, Marianne said softly. She continued to hold the coffee out, sweat dripping down the side of the cup onto her hand, a glazed smile on her face. April wondered if the spacey beatific cheeriness was Marianne's natural state of being, or if it was just something that came out when she was in the presence of the bicycle girl, as she was now. April glanced at the coffee and back to Marianne. You thought wrong, she said. In the center of the crowd of middle graders, Jules poked her head up and scowled in the direction of the car. Luna followed, and like a field of prairie dogs, the whole crowd craned their necks and looked. Marianne leaned over, her mouth close to April's ear. He's alive, she whispered. He needs your help. A sick rush of fear hit her stomach, and the smell of caramel latte filled her nose like a warning from the past. April never drank sweet coffee drinks anymore. They tasted like naivete and betrayal. She reached out to push Marianne away and ended up connecting with the frozen drink, slapping it out of Marianne's hand. It flew and landed a few feet away, exploding on the pavement of the parking lot. I think you need to get the fuck away from me, April said. Across the road, the tall blonde man opened the door of an acid green Jeep. He leaned against the roof of the car, watching. Marianne, he called anxiously. Marianne gave him a parade wave kind of float, reassuring and vague. So Marianne had a boyfriend now. At the same time, Jules charged towards the car. April looked at Jules and shook her head tightly, meaning, don't come over here. A small gesture, but it was enough. Marianne followed April's line of sight and landed on Jules. She glanced back at the blonde man by the green Jeep and nodded her head in Jules' direction. April felt a cold wave of fear in the pit of her stomach. For the second time in less than an hour, Jules had been spotted by one of the crazies who'd come to town to witness the coming apocalypse.
Marianne's an interesting character because she tells April that she's left the cult, and yet she seems to me like she's still a true believer. In your mind, was she someone who thought she left the cult, or is she just flat out lying?
The cult has a more violent approach to things. And Marianne, having met April earlier, thinks that they can, do what they need to do without the violence. So she has left the cult. She and Jonathan have left the cult, but the Jonathan less. He's more invested in violence, I think, as you find out. But yeah, she left the cult because she didn't agree with the plan.
And yet, in her own way, she's still a true believer.
Oh yeah, she's totally a true believer. It's not like she's left the cult. She's just starting her own schism, really.
Her own branch of the cult, her kinder and gentler branch of the cult. Yeah.
Apparently, this is what I do. I just cause cults to replicate in my novels. But
well, you did mention there used to be 2 cults, and did you end up doing a lot of research on cults for this, or just kind of generic what we know of cults in general?
I did a certain amount of research on millenarian cults, which are kind of end of time cults. I did a lot of mining research more than anything. There's so much mining that enters in, less than I could have been. But yeah, I did a lot of research, which cults and mines and
which brings up an interesting point for authors. The danger of all our research is wanting to put it all in there. Like, I found all these fascinating things. I don't think you did that from what you wrote. I had no reason to think you didn't know what you were talking about mining, but I didn't feel like you were dumping a ton of research either. So what would your advice be to authors on avoiding the information dump?
Oh my gosh. You're ADHD too. I'm sure this happens to you. I just rabbit hole. And if you're ADHD and you love research and you just have to be ready to kill darlings. And that's my ADHD. I write 15 pounds of plot for a 5-pound sack. And but I'm also not precious about things. I will kill things and I will take editorial advice. But I do love rabbit holes. The book that they carry around from Kennedy and Asimov, those were 2 actual Soviet scientist grifters.
Interesting. Okay.
So they did not write that book, but I came upon them in my research, and they really built the Soviet government out of millions and millions of rubles, promising to open portals for military usage.
Really? The Soviet government got money from the government by promising to open portals?
Yes.
Wow.
They were.
Why? What did they want to do with these portals?
Well, these guys were physicists, and they convinced them that they had a path to sort of an interdimensional travel thing, which is not, as we know, is not all that far-fetched. So I mean, this was in the 70s. They did not know what they were doing, but I mean, it was kind of like tabletop cold fusion, right? I don't know if you remember that, but they just...
My husband is a quantum scientist. I would like to say I know all about all of this. I'd be lying.
Well, see if he can. It's Asimov and Kennedy. If he's heard of them, and he'll probably get a kick if he hasn't. It's a pretty deep dive, but research.
And this is not Isaac Asimov. This is different.
No. This is and I know Kennedy is right. I may be getting the Asimov wrong, but what's in the novel is right.
Okay.
That's the other thing about being ADHD. I go in these deep dives, and a lot of it leaves my head by the next time I'm,
Which brings up the question, being ADHD, doing all this research, what is your method for keeping track of it?
Oh, that's an interesting question. It's odd because maybe you find this as an ADHD person. There's like a almost when I start a new project, there's almost like a reluctance. I don't want to do this. And then when I get into it, it's like a switch flips. And that's all I think about. I get into the hyper focus. And so I
get into the hyper focus right away. And in fact, it was very, very strange. The last of my 5 books in my time travel series was published a long time ago. I don't know if it's as long as 10 years, maybe 9 years. But when I was deep in it, and it was a span of about 9.5, 10 years where I was just up past my eyebrows in research in medieval Scotland. I was teaching music lessons at the time, and I'm sure most writers know this feeling of when you are just heads down in it, and you're in this
tunneled.
Your mind starts processing. Your mind starts almost, I don't want to say believing you're in that world because we're not crazy. We know we're not. And yet our brain is functioning almost as if we are, which is the best way I know how to say it. And so if a student didn't show up, I would immediately open my hard copy and I would edit for a half hour or an hour if 2 students didn't show up. And then this little 6-year-old shows up and my mind is going, you were just in the middle of a medieval battle with swords and horses falling in murder pits. It was the weirdest feeling. I mean,
I know. I'm sure you're like, what was your name again, kid?
It was very strange because I knew their name. I knew what I was doing. I knew I wasn't in medieval Scotland, but there was this weird thing going on in my head where like I'm living in both these worlds at once with this innocent little 7-year-old and these murderous medieval knights. I'm gonna kill, kill. What movie is that from? Oh, that's from Alice's Restaurant. I want to kill. And there's just this part of my brain that's in this medieval warrior world. And okay, I'm killing to save my family, but wait, I'm teaching piano lessons to a 7-year-old.
You probably, hold the kind of sword that your character is in your brain. It's not like you need.
I don't have it behind me because we finally hung it up on the wall. But yes, we actually do have quite a variety of medieval weapons in our house.
Nice.
We have the flail, we have the mace. I believe we have the morning star.
Wow.
We have 2 claymores. We have a double-headed axe. So I'm just putting this out there. Anyone who thinks they might break into my home, you might want to think twice. My very favorite story of medieval history. Robert the Bruce is riding his little Garon, which is no more than a Connemara pony, back and forth in front of his troops, nothing but leather armor. 5,000 men, and across the field are 20,000 men of the Flower of England, as they called it, on big war horses with lances, metal armor, the finest weapons known to mankind at the time. And young Henry de Bohun comes charging across the field, seeing his moment of glory. He's going to slay the King of Scots before the battle even starts. So here's Henry on his giant war horse. Here's Robert the Bruce on his little Connemara pony. He just watches and watches as Henry de Bohun comes charging across the field with his lance. At the last second, he twitches the reins, stands up in his stirrups, and slams the double-headed axe straight through his head, helmet and all, straight through a helmet, splits him down to the sternum with his double-headed axe. It's an incredible story, and you can't make up a better story than history actually already told us.
Right. If somebody made that up, you'd be like, you can't really do that.
That
like,
didn't
yes.
happen.
Yeah. Yes, you can.
It did. And it was a major factor in, this battle of 5,000 against 20,000, that it really was meant to break the morale of the Scots, and it did the opposite. So it's a fascinating story. My second question, and writing with ADHD and reviewing with ADHD, I guess my question was, how do you organize all this research? Have you found a good way?
I'm one of those people that I have multiple files open at all times, and I take a lot of hand notes because I'm very much into neuromechanical processing. It helps with the dyslexia. You remember more when you write down. But when I am working, there are papers everywhere.
When I'm alive, there are papers everywhere.
My nephew came to live with when I think I was working on this book, and I was editing, and I had So I had all the scenes written out on note cards, and I had notes that I'd written to myself, and I had this giant table, but the floor of my room was like, and I was working in the dining room, which we didn't use that much. The floor was filled with papers, and my nephew's girlfriend, now wife at the time, was like, I could go in there and clean up for her. This, it's no way to live.
And you're
He was
like,
like, no, I didn't even say that. Lorenzo was like, we don't go into that room anymore.
it's a funny story. I also used to work in my dining room, which we never used, partly because we had 9 kids and they didn't fit in the dining room.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I used it as my office. But at one point, I had this giant whiteboard on the wall, and I had written in big letters on this whiteboard, "Should I kill Simon?" I don't remember if somebody actually went in there to do some work on the house or whatever it was. And I'm like, oh my gosh, did they see "Should I kill Simon" in big letters?
You left the murder board out. When there was company.
I'm like, no, I'm just writing. I swear, it covers a multitude of things on our search history, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
So your comment about rabbit holes really made me think, I'm using AI Copilot to do research now, and it's a great tool.
Uh-huh.
But I do wonder sometimes, how much do we miss the rabbit holes that we would have gone down? For instance, one of the corners I wrote myself into was I put them, they're spying in Carlisle, they're Scottish, they're spying in Carlisle, which is English, and their arch enemy sees them, closes the town gates, and I'm like, okay, great. Well, the old saying, get your character up a tree and then throw rocks at him.
Right.
I did. And I'm like, now how am I going to get them down? I kept researching, and I found out that there literally exists a medieval sewage tunnel under the very house I had put them in.
Wow.
Right. I mean, history just kept working in my favor. Every time I wrote myself into a corner, I researched and found out this can work. But do you think that AI, how do you see it as a research tool? Like, will we miss these rabbit holes that teach us something, or does it save us time?
It's interesting. Of course, I would never use AI to write. So there's this. I think as writers, we have to have ethical, bright lines about that. But I use Claude, and one of the things that happens with me, and I mean, I still will Google stuff, but I use Claude for very specific weird rabbit holes that would probably take me hours, and it can give it to me in minutes, or days.
Yeah.
And I was working on I'm working on a novel that is kind of a haunted house situation. And there's a town called Columbus, Indiana, and Eero Saarinen built houses there. So he's like the guy who built the St. Louis Arch, built mid-century modern houses. So they're relatively famous. And I started thinking, what if there was a Book of the Dead, but it was written about Eero Saarinen's house designs, and it was written in that sort of slightly pretentious architectural speak, larded with a lot of German phrases for things. So, and I did spend, and I will probably never.
By which you mean a word this long?
Yeah. Get to Kunstwerkhaus, like the Death Workhouse. Right. I would give it its subject and ask it to write these treaties about a spectral locale in the house, and they're hilarious, and I'm never going to use them. But point I'm making is that, like, you can still rabbit hole pretty seriously with AI. Like, I just killed a day doing that, but it was fun.
Right. I do love AI, and it's interesting talking with authors about it. Some authors hate it with a passion, but I think they're talking more about using it to write books. I'm using it for, in part, things that I just need to get done. Like, all this homesteading is so new to me. I can either spend, 2 days researching a thing, by which point, the season is moving on and I'm behind in my work, or I can ask AI and go out and get it done, which is a different use from saying write a book. But
right.
Anyway, it is interesting to see the different opinions. I mean, I think I've met authors who like it just fine, and authors who are like, well, there's good and bad. So
Good and bad. And I think there has to be, like I said, an ethical bright line. You can't have it right for you. I mean, you can, but I think you lose a spark, but yeah, I use it for research all the time. And it's interesting because I took a screenwriting class, and I turned not this novel but the next one into a screenplay, and I used it to see if I was hitting all the beats at the correct spot. So on an editor, but this is like a novel I wrote and a screenplay I based on the novel. And so I'm asking a high level editing question, and it is not giving me any suggestions. It's just saying you didn't hit this beat and you need to hit that beat, and here's what's missing here. So that is very, very helpful. And it's the kind of thing that, like, it would take me a long time to figure that out for myself, or I've got beta readers who might have given me that suggestion, but it's just very easy to do that. And I was writing a magazine article, and I fed it in, and it did a little editing for me. But then it said, would you like me to write the query to the magazine? And I was like, no, thank you. That is my job, not yours. So
I do think AI is interesting in that I'm not sure how some people know a thing is written by AI. For instance, on Facebook, I've noticed a trend of these very, very long posts. They just go on and on and on. They all seem to, even though they're on different subjects, they seem to follow a pattern where they make this kind of moral statement. They give these 3 short sentences. They go on with another morally high ground narrative, 3 short sentences, incomplete sentences, trying to punctuate the point. They're all the same. Till I think these are all being written by AI. On the other hand, my husband, in addition to his main job, he does teach at a local university. And one of their tools is I believe they're required to run students' writing through AI or an AI detector. And he has students that he runs it through, and AI is like, I'm sure this is AI. And he knows the student. He's like, no. And he talks to the student. And then I had a friend on Facebook say, AI is now saying if you use the M dash, that's a sign that you used AI. And he's like, this is a literary tool.
I've heard that all the time. I use M dashes all the time because
I do too.
ADHD, and I'm like, my sentence needs to continue further than a grammatical sentence should continue. M dash, So I've heard that, and I just, no, that's not necessary.
It's an interesting question, and it's a world that's evolving very fast. So not only the use.
And it's interesting because I would not, I mean, I'm older, obviously, and I would not have been able to write the kind of novels I write now before Google, because I would have had to go to a library and start pulling books off the shelf. And good Lord, let me loose in a library. I'm never getting out. It's just like find my desiccated corpse huddled over a pile of
$5,000 in fines. That was me. I'm like, I'm going to take just these 16, 18, 23 books. I'll read them in the next 3 weeks. Like 5 months later, I'm buried under fines. No, I need to read these.
So it's just another tool that we need to manage, just like Google.
I do see AI as a tool. It's a big question. Where can people find you online?
Oh, you can find me at lauracreedle.com. I'm also on Instagram and TikTok, at Laura Creedle. Name is very recognizable. So anytime you type my name, they're all everybody who has my last name is related to me. So if you type in Laura Creedle, you'll get me.
That's kind of how it is with Vosicas. To my knowledge, one family came over here from what was then Bohemia, Prague, in the mid to late 1800s. To my knowledge, that was a family with 8 children. I think every Vosica in this country goes back to that family. I don't know that for a fact, but I don't know of any other Vosicas who came over. So anytime I meet a Vosica online, I'm like, yeah, I'm sure we're related. It's just a question of how. So Creedle is Creedle, DLE.
DLE, yes.
Yeah, pretty much like it sounds. You can find me at booksandbrews.net. You can find our Books and Brews Light authors. They're not at our website, but they are at YouTube at symbol Books and Brews spelled out. You can find my books about time travels and how to maim horses and fun stuff like that, and kill people with trebuchets and double-headed swords at lauravosica.com. Hopefully most of you aren't that bloodthirsty, but trust me, it's interesting. You can find you can find the books I publish at gabrielshornpress.com. And you can find all those wonderful sheep, plus our rabbits, our chickens, and our dog, who's a cross between Yeti and Mount McKinley, at glenmurrellfarms.wordpress.com. Do you have any upcoming public events?
Not at this point. Last weekend was Teen Cons. That was my big, last hurrah for. Oh, and this is why I don't have any upcoming events. My daughter's getting married in a couple of weeks, so that's my big upcoming event.
Okay. No, we've had a hard time getting together this month because it was your teen com, then it was my grandson's first communion, and now Christmas. And it reached the end of the month, and like, we have to do an interview because I have to get
we got to get it done.
I have no upcoming public events, but anyone who wants to help me shovel rabbit poop is welcome to join me. I'll make it public because it's not a job I like. So coming up next, we have J.K. Divya, who writes dark fantasy, mythological horror, and paranormal. We have Barry Black, who is a former FBI master bomb technician, which so that will be an explosive interview. Hopefully it won't bomb. In July, we have Randy Lurch, who is a former MLB. Tell me what that means. I want to say Master League Baseball. I know that's wrong.
Major League.
I'm so bad at sports. The only reason I know there are 9 on a baseball team is because I have 9 kids, and everyone went, "You have enough for a baseball team."
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah. So that's how I know how many are on a baseball team. But anyway, I'm excited to talk to him. And in September, we have Charles Graham. We do not have anyone lined up for August. So anybody who knows a great author for August, contact us at booksandbrewslive@gmail.com. And we will love to hear from you. I'm looking for a cup to cheers with, and I drank it all.
Cheers.
Cheers.